Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first of the two regular March meetings of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. It is 6:47 p.m. on March 7th, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before going on, I should say, pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. And before we go into action items, it's customary that we introduce ourselves. So I'm just going to go across my screen and start with Mr. Falvey.
Hi there, my name is Ryan Falvey. I am a resident of Ward 2.
Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I live in Spring Hill. I'm an attorney, and I was trained as a city planner.
And Mr. Chagnon.
I'm DJ Chagnon. I'm a landscape architect and a resident of Ward 5.
Vice Chair Kelly.
I am Robin Kelly. I am the Realtor representative on the commission, and I am also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
Thanks. I'm Eric Parks, resident of Ward 3, historic homeowner and an architect. And we have staff today with Ms. Chekowitz.
Hello, I'm Wendy Chekowitz, a preservation planner and planner with the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division.
Okay, and so tonight we have three cases. The first is we have one alteration and two demolition cases, and we'll start with going in order here. The alterations to local historic districts, we have HPC ALT 2022.77, address being 56 Bow Street. The applicant is Ashley Blum and Mike Bittarelli. The owner is the same as the applicants, and the applicant seeks a certificate of appropriateness to install a window well. We have a staff report for this. Do we have, is the applicant here tonight?
Will the applicant please raise their hands, and I will go ahead and unmute you. All right, Andrew McAuliffe, you have been unmuted.
Okay, great.
And Mike Bittarelli, you are also unmuted.
Hi, good evening. And just give us, it's a pretty narrow scope. Just give us introduce yourselves and give us a quick synopsis for the record of what you're up to and anything else you want to add before we take it up.
My name's Andrew. I'm the contractor involved. Mike is here as well, I believe, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah, here I am. Sorry, I'm unmuted now. Yes, I'm here.
Very good. I just wanted to say that basically we have an existing window where we want to put a means of egress window. It's not going to get any wider. It's only going to get deeper. It currently has a vinyl window now. I don't know if that was a faux pas in the past or what it was, but it's currently a vinyl window. And all we want to do is make it a safer means of egress window so that the homeowners can finish their basement and have it's just a fire safety health kind of thing. From the street, you're really not going to see a big difference because only about, I don't know, maybe a foot or so of it extends out past the driveway. And if we put a brick surround around it, you really aren't going to see the window very much from the street at all. It's towards the back of the house, though it is still visible if you're walking by looking down their driveway. But it will be very inconspicuous, especially if there's a brick surround top portion around it that would it would actually conceal a lot of the window. So it's not, I don't think it's going to change the sort of general appearance of the house much. A lot of the nearby houses also have brick surrounds for their window wells. We've included a picture, I think, of one of them. I think that house is only about 2 houses away. So I don't think it'll really change the look and feel of the house or the neighborhood. It'll just allow them a better safety entrance exit in case of fire or other catastrophe.
Thank you. Assuming is that it? Shall we move to public comment? Unless anybody else in your group has something to add.
No, nothing to add. Well said, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you. With that, then we'll open this case up to public comment portion of this hearing. So anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand and we'll act accordingly.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment. Mr. Chairman, I am not seeing anyone with their hands raised at the moment. I will go through the list one more time just to make sure. All right, no members of the public have their hand raised. You may close the public comment.
All right, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing for this case. And does anybody in the commission have any questions or comments about this? Looks like a very straightforward scope.
I do. It would be helpful for me to actually have a better idea of where or on the house this is located. I'm wondering if the applicant can show us on some kind of chart or graph or map.
Mike, do you have anything like that handy?
I think it was in my application, with the footprint of the house. Basically, if you're facing the house from the street head on, it's on the right side of the house, and it's about halfway back. We have a fence that it covers the back door that we have, but so this is right in front of the fence. I would say it's about, I don't know, Andrew, what do you think, 20, 30 feet from the sidewalk, deep into under the right side of the house.
Yeah, it would be about something like that.
But it looks from the map, I'm looking at page 13 of the package,
Oh, wow.
like there's an L on the back of the house with a jog, so that there's the front part of the house is wider than the back part on that side. And I'm wondering where this window is in relation to that jog.
In relation to that jog, it's right before the jog. Because when you go into the jog, there's like a little porch there with a few steps up, and just past that is a bulkhead, and that's all inside of a fence.
Okay. Good, thank you.
I didn't see that map, but I'm looking at from street view. So you're saying it's past the main front massing of the house, beyond the fence?
No, sorry, it's immediately before the fence
Okay.
like up against the house.
So it aligns with the right two windows vertically, I imagine.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it. And you propose, so it's a vinyl, I saw the product, the submittal, it's a pre-made thing you excavate and plunk in there, and then you're proposing to construct a short brick knee wall with a stone cap to hide the syntheticness of it, make it blend in more.
That's the proposal now.
Okay.
From the street view, it looks like this would be pretty hidden by the shrubs. Am I right?
It would be hard to see, but it's not impossible to see.
Okay, right. And when we do evaluation of what is visible from the street, we normally ignore shrubs because they can be cut down. But I'm trying to get an idea of the visual impact of this. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments in the commission?
I just had a quick question. The photograph that was included in the application of what was the phrasing on it? The similar existing window well?
Yes.
With the stone cap bricks around it. Has a railing and ladder. Are you proposing a railing around it, or are you just proposing?
We are not. No, it's just going to be the brick and the stone. The railing is and ladders, just because that one's a lot deeper. Ours doesn't need to be nearly as deep, and code doesn't require it.
That makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, looks like you're under 2 feet deep, or 2 feet, just below 30 inches. I mean, it looks, there's no denying the benefit to having another means of egress from the basement. So
yeah,
I don't see anything objectionable about this. It's minimally visible. It's a necessity. I mean, it's an improvement safety-wise. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
I think it's very reasonable and obviously necessary, as others have articulated, and very easy to support, in my opinion. So I'd fully support this.
I think my only question to the rest of the commission would be how we feel about a vinyl window as opposed to a requesting a wood window or an aluminum clad.
Well, it's an existing vinyl. Is that what I heard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
currently the window there is vinyl, and as well as all of the other basement windows in the house. Admittedly, there's only a handful of them, but they're all currently vinyl.
So by right, one could replace vinyl with vinyl. Is that correct? In kind, basically.
Except that it's now an entirely different window. The dimensions are different.
Large window. Yeah, it gets deeper.
While I don't disagree with you, it will get deeper. From the street, you won't really see much of a change. It currently goes from about the level of the ground to where the house clapboards start, and that's really all you're going to see of the window, even though it will go below ground or below grade, if that's helpful in any way.
The width isn't changing, it's just strictly the depth.
Yep.
And that depth, it could be argued, is not visible from a public way because it'll be below grade, unless, I guess, hypothetically, if you have, I mean, vinyl, if every other window there is vinyl on the basement level, it doesn't make, I don't know that we could force a change to something that's an upgrade from what's there. Vinyl is one could replace, as Robin said, though, that it is going to get deeper, but to me, I'm okay with that remaining a vinyl window, albeit deeper.
I feel pretty much the same way, given the situation. I think it'd stick out more if we replaced it with something wooden to call attention to the other vinyl ones almost. I just felt like it was worth making sure we addressed the question.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree with all of that. I think we could require wood because it's not technically a replacement in kind, but I think functionally it is, and partly it's okay because of it's fairly far back on the house and fairly hidden, and if there's any place that vinyl windows are justified, it's in the basement so that they don't have to then be replacing it in not very many years when the wood rots. So I'm fine with it.
Any thoughts from anybody else? If not, we could probably move ahead with a motion from somebody.
I move that we vote to approve the request for alteration.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of approving the, all in favor of Vice Chair Kelly's motion regarding 56 Bow Street, say aye.
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 Opposed? And we'll do a roll call for the record here. Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. So thank you for coming to us tonight, folks. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next two items on our agenda are both determinations of historic significance. And the first of the two is HPC ALT 2022.49, addresses 80 Professors Row. The applicant is Kappa chapter of Zeta Psi Corporation. Owner is the same as the applicant, and the applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed in minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here for this tonight?
Will the applicant please raise your hand and we will unmute you. All right, Anne Vigorito, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, Wendy. I am also joined by members of my team from the applicant, as well as, I believe Carmine Gutrino is listening in. He's our structural engineer. You may or may not want to hear from him directly this evening, because I know we did submit a report relative to the building itself, and that may be more necessary at a later time. But we are here this evening to discuss 80 Professors Way. This building is not owned by Tufts University, just to be clear. It was a former fraternity home. Our contention is that it's not historically significant. I did read through the staff report. The ownership and the people that live there, our contention does not give rise to the level of historic significance that one would, construe it as being significant. And then the building itself, it's in quite despair repair, so to say. It's not habitable. The building department, inspectional service has posted, a stay out of it. It's danger. Many alterations to this building. One of the biggest is the rear of the building was a much later addition, so was not part of the original construction of this building. There's other alterations like that rooftop balcony, the stairs, which are wood, all of the replacement windows and doors. They've all been replaced over the years. There are asphalt shingles, probably with some asbestos under them. The shed dormer was added, and then also the bay windows at the left elevations were removed a number of years ago. So in sum and substance, there hasn't been much of a historical feel maintained or retained in this building at this time. So we would specifically request that it not be found significant. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from your group that would like to speak before I move to the public comment? You'll have a chance to talk later if we have questions. Okay. In that case, then let us open this case up for public comment.
Any members from the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment. Rocco DiRico, you have been unmuted. You will just need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Rocco DiRico. I'm the Director of Government Community Relations for Tufts University. My address is 14 Capon Street in Medford. First of all, I would like to state that this building is over 100 years old. It is historically significant. It's in the very center of our campus, and it's located directly across from Gifford House, which is the president's home. It is in disrepair, but I would argue that that is due to owner neglect. We oppose the demolition permit request for 80 Professors Row, and we asked the Somerville Historic Commission to deem this property preferably preserved and impose an 18-month demo delay on the property. There are numerous encumbrances on this property, both in the deed and in the Somerville zoning ordinance. Tufts University has been negotiating in good faith with the owners of 80 Professors Row for months. There are numerous restrictions on the property's deed. These include a use restriction, a right of first offer, and a right to purchase. In all three restrictions, Tufts has the ability to act on these restrictions at any time it sees fit. I should also note that 80 Professors Row is also located within the Tufts University zoning district. In the past few years, Tufts has acquired similar properties. Today, there are only 3 privately owned fraternities left on campus, and Tufts intends to purchase 80 Professors Row. Tufts intends to use this property to provide more on-campus housing for our undergraduate students. That is a mutual goal shared by Tufts University and the city of Somerville. 80 Professors Row sits inside the Tufts University zoning district. Properties within the Tufts University zoning district are subject to a very particular set of conditions. The Somerville zoning ordinance clearly states that any use and/or development inside the TU zoning district must be deemed necessary by Tufts University. Tufts University will only support, and thus only deem necessary, any new development that supports our mission. Tufts will oppose the development of any third party not affiliated with the university. The Somerville zoning ordinance also requires that the property owner provide parking for the students living at this property. Tufts can do that off-site because we have centralized parking in our garage. A private developer would not be able to do this and would have to provide parking on this site, which would significantly devalue the property. We, officials from Tufts University, have met with officials from the mayor's office, the planning department, the building department, and other city officials. And the city has expressed that they support our interpretation of the Somerville zoning ordinance and will support our efforts to purchase this property. This is consistent with the university's past efforts to purchase 123 Packard Avenue in Somerville and redevelop it to house undergraduate students on campus. Tufts University cannot support the demolition of 80s Professors Row without a clear plan to redevelop the property. Given what I've heard tonight, I've heard no plan whatsoever of what they plan to do with the property after they demolish this historic structure. Tufts opposes this demolition permit request and will oppose any efforts by a third party to redevelop this site.
Thank you. Any other members of the public would like to speak?
Any other members of the public, please raise your hand using the raise hand function and you'll be unmuted to speak on this item. Rod Cavallo, you have been unmuted on our side. You will need to unmute yourself on your side.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street, Somerville, Mass., a fourth-generation property owner and resident of the city since 1894. I think it's the function of this commission to preserve properties of this kind. I've accused the commission of overreaching and many other things, and I stand behind those statements, but it is my clear opinion that this building has significance and should be preserved.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Go ahead and please raise your hand using the raise hand function. All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give it one last pass through the attendees list. I do not see any other members of the public with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And just a reminder for those who haven't been through this process before, the demolition delay process in Somerville is a two-step thing. First, we have what we're doing tonight, which is a determination of significance. And in this part of the process, we address purely the significance of the existing structure. We're not evaluating whether it's savable, whether it is, the weighing the alternates, what might replace it. Things like the structure report you mentioned you have is useful information, but at this point, that is not something we would really take into consideration, the amount of work that would be required to keep it if it were to stay, for example. If we determine that it's significant, then the following month we'd have a public hearing in which we take up what's called the preferably preserved state. And in that case, we would review, to what extent keeping it around, what kind of work is involved, and some of the other nuanced stuff do with it. And if it's considered preferably preserved, then it begins an 18-month demolition delay process during which we're to work with the applicant and determine alternates to demolition, things like that. If we can't come to any kind of consensus at that end of the 18 months, then the demolition permit is granted by the city. Other issues to do with Tufts zoning and all that notwithstanding, this is just dealing narrowly with the city demolition delay process. So, and with that, I'll throw it over to the commission. Anybody want to have any initial thoughts on this?
So I can go first. I think that this building is obviously of great historic significance, both architecturally in terms of the building itself, which is not merely more than 75 years, but it's 150 years. It's a building of architectural distinction. It's part of Professors Row and contributes significantly to the streetscape. And it also has quite significant history in terms of its connection with the university and its original ownership by Professor Shipman. And I have to say that the suggestion that it's not of historical significance is really, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth to have that suggested to us.
Yeah, I think it's a really disingenuous position, particularly when, you know, there's an old version of a Kappa chapter website where it talks about the says founded in 1855, the Kappa chapter of Zeta Psi holds the distinction of being the first Greek organization at Tufts University. One of the oldest buildings on campus, the Kappa chapter house holds an important place in Tufts history. And to now, after 100 years of owning this property and failing to maintain it so that it could continue, which we've got lots of buildings of this vintage that are in really good shape because they've been maintained over the years. And now, you know, coming to us trying to say that it's not historic, it's not safe, et cetera, just feels really crummy. As I agree completely with Mr. Bauer, this is very obviously a historically significant property for all the reasons he cited. So I am firmly in the camp that this is historically significant and should be deemed such.
Thank you. Anybody else in the commission?
I heartily concur with what both Vice Chair Kelly and Mr. Bauer said, and also just bring up the significance. The property isn't solely the building, too. I think that the character and the space of the grounds and the rest of the site really contribute to the feeling of Professor's Row. The openness of the green space around it, which its relationship to the other buildings, all are clearly very important to the feel of Professor's Row and the overall sense of the campus across from President's Lawn and so forth. Seems pretty cut and dried, the historic significance of the property and the site.
Thanks. How about you, Mr. Falvey? Any thoughts?
I'd love to pile on, you know, because I totally agree. And also I find it unbelievable that someone would try to say that this is not significant. I think there's significance in a number of different ways that have been demonstrated here, and I think we should fully support that. And I think we're probably ready to make a motion and take a vote and move on. I think it's a waste of time debating this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I move that we vote to find the property historically significant.
I second that.
I'll second that.
Favor of Vice Chair?
Make your comment.
No, I kind of, I agree that the modifications to the structure are off to the rear. It's very succinct that I'm looking at the street, the way it presents itself to Professor's Row is beautiful. It's, you know, yes, the windows are replaced. That's manageable.
Right.
I don't see anything about this that is it hasn't really been bastardized or all the kind of things that would often happen to a house like this. The rear addition, yes, it's a little bit, you know, it's wider than a typical rear L would be, but that's a distinct part. The massing of the original, I'm going to say 160-year-old house is still there. So I agree.
Let's vote.
We have a second already. So I'll take all in favor of deeming this as historically significant, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed. We'll do a roll call. Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And we need to adopt findings. And who would like to take a stab at that? Anybody?
The property contributes significantly to the streetscape and retains much of its original, the original form and mass of the circa 1859 building. Some of the historic aspects of people who lived there, notably the professor who was the first occupant, and its contributions to the history of Tufts. And some might even say, for the 100 years or nearly there that the fraternity occupied it, there was historic aspects around that while the fraternity was active. So I don't know what else folks want to add.
No, I think you covered it. It plays an important role in the streetscape because it's a similar vintage house and it's a corner, so it's kind of an anchor building that way. But has a prominent role in the streetscape. It's intact, well represents its time period, relatively early structure for Somerville. I think those are good findings. Anything else people would like to add? In that case, we could have a motion to adopt those findings.
So moved.
So we adopt the finding.
Say Mr. Chagnon, and then seconded by Mr. Bauer, did I see?
That works.
All in favor of adopting the motion, the findings put forward by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. So, the applicant knows the routine. We'll be coming back next month for a preferably preserved hearing. And if we have your structure report, if there's anything else you want to present, let us know. Thank you all. Okay, so the next and last case for tonight is 53 Chester. It's HPC ALT 2023.01, 53 Chester Street. The applicant is G2 Par Somerville LLC. The owner is the same as the applicant, and the applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Is the applicant here tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Parks, members of the commission, Attorney Ann Vigorito at 424 Broadway, Somerville. I'm here on behalf of 53 Chester Street, the applicant and owner. He is also here this evening. Our review of the building itself and even reviewing staff's report, we would contend that this home is not historically significant. At first blush, when I just, walked by it, I did my first review of it, I found it to be a hodgepodge of many things. And as I went through the staff report and, the many, many, many alterations, the portico projection of the front porch, the extension of the second floor front facade, the shed dormer, the enclosure of the windows on the right of elevation, the metal stairways in the rear, the wood porch in the rear, the replacement windows and doors throughout, the rear lean-to, the conversion of the second floor of the L into a porch, and then, of course, last but not least, the addition of the tower. If you walk along Chester Street, I really don't know how this is part of that streetscape. It's really been so heavily altered over the years. Reading through the staff's report and with my own knowledge with the owner, this home was a rental for many, many years, so many alterations occurred because of that. And our feeling is that this building should not be deemed historically significant. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from your group that would like to speak about this case? Okay, then with that, I'll open this hearing up for public comment for this case. If any member of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand and staff will unmute you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. My internet froze for a second.
Oh,
Any
no.
members of the public wishing to speak, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted for a 2-minute public comment period. John Greenip, you have been unmuted. You are still self-muted and will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, good evening. I'm actually the applicant, chairman, and I appreciate consideration from the board tonight. And as my attorney said earlier, we look at the house as an opportunity to help, with the new zoning in Davis Square. We really believe that with the MR4 zoning, we're looking at putting something respectful into that site, and it will conform to the new zoning. As we reviewed the site originally, we do believe, I didn't want to use your term, Chairman Park, so I'm going to use the term Frankenstein. We do believe it's a bit of a Frankenstein in the fact that it's changed so much over the years, and to have it really be in its original condition was hard for us to see. So we respectfully request you to.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Through you. So this is public comment. The applicant will need to wait till after public comment to make further notes about the property.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's fine. Yeah, we'll come back to you. Thank you. I mean, yeah. You'll have a chance to say more tonight. So thank you. And you've already pretty much said, I think, what you wanted to say. Any other members of the public who'd like to speak?
Ron Cavallo, you are unmuted on our side. You will need to unmute yourself on your side.
This is Ron Cavallo. Is that directed to me?
Yes.
Okay, because I did not hear my name stated. Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street. I've already introduced myself. I think this building is one hot mess, and I think to not allow a demolition permit would be frankly a disgrace and a disservice to the city. And if you are aware, condominium conversions and small development is way down, way down. And I'm concerned about the economic policies that I consider to be highly damaging to the well-being of this city. And I'm very concerned about a number of factors. One of them being the infrastructure, and the other being the fantasy idea that the city is going to be a net zero city by 2050. It's a fantasy. It's never going to happen. The only way it can happen is that if structures such as this are torn down and replaced with modern structures. It's clear that this building has absolutely no value to the city. It has negative value. It would have positive value if it's removed and replaced with something good. I fully support the demolition of this building, and I fully support the expansion of the tax base. This building should come down. It's a mess.
Thank you. Any other members of the public want to speak?
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. All right, Mr. Chairman, I do not see any other members of the public with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
I'll close. I close the public comment portion of this hearing. And I think we already covered the process for the demolition delay with the previous case. And I think maybe before we start discussing in great depth, I have a hard time figuring out just what is original to this building. I mean, I get a good idea, but maybe we should discuss that a bit before we go on. I saw your analysis, Ms. Chekowicz, about the front. The original map shows a different kind of massing. I suspect it's because it was cut at the ground plane and didn't show any of the upper story on the 1895 map. I guess the 1895 map is the first map we see it. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, did you say the 1859 map?
1895 map, the Bromley map is the first map that this structure appears. Is that, it did not show up in the 1880.
That is correct.
And then the footprint seems to take sorts of different permutations throughout the years and subsequent maps, as you show in your report, which is very informative. But it appears to me that the entire back L removed and replaced very early in the life of this structure, long enough ago that it's weathered quite a lot. The front porch was added at some point, possibly the tower. That kind of your conclusion?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes. It would appear that the portions of the front have were added later on. The side tower was added at a later point. The rear lean-to was added at a later point. My guess is that a good portion of these things were added early on enough that they could have had their own significance from, I would suggest maybe the early 1900s is my assumption, but I can't say more than that. So they may have earned their own historic significance from that.
Thank you. So I'll kick this over to you all in the commission. Who wants to weigh in first?
I'll take a stab at it. It's so heavily modified. It is not at all, it does not continue to be a good example of what it likely originally was. And where it is, abutted on three sides by commercial properties, not contributing in any significant way to streetscape. It is such a hodgepodge. It's just hard to sort of make heads or tails of it. And I don't find that it has sufficient significance to warrant declaring it historically significant.
Anybody else? I'll just add then that I'm of the same mindset. That it's I could see a scenario where that tower had been part of something that was originally more open all the way through, but as a representation of something that would normally be a Queen Anne thing, that none of the massing reflects that. It doesn't have any of the different roof lines. And if that had been original to it, it wasn't very well conceived. It's not to me, it's not a good representation of a particular architectural style. There's not enough of anything remaining to kind of fill in the blanks there. So I'm not feeling high level of significance when I look at this. And it's also a good point that it's abutted on all sides of that corner by a different type of building type. So it's not exactly holding together a streetscape on that block. Those are my thoughts. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I would say that, to the extent that there's anything that is at all preserved in it, it's sort of that gable-ended, slightly Greek revival front end to it. And there's a lot of that around. I don't think this, with its modifications, is needed as an example of the things that it does actually show. So it's so heavily modified. It's got interesting charm in its own way, but nothing worth preserving.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a building I've always noticed driving down the street.
Yeah,
but that's not necessarily a flattering thing. It's just like you look at it and say, oh, wow, that poor house.
That's how I've always felt about it.
I think I come out at a different place, at least at, sorry, I didn't mean to be stepping on somebody else. If somebody else is
not. No, I was inviting you to
come out at a different place, at least at the significance stage. It has certainly been heavily modified, but some of the modifications themselves probably are old enough to have independent significance, even if we may think that that may have been poor choices for the people who did it. And most of the basic structure is intact of the building, and we can look at it and get a fairly good idea of the basic massing in it. And putting that together with the work that staff has put together about people who live there, I think there's enough to declare it significant, even if the ultimate conclusion may be that it's not perfectly preserved.
Thank you.
Sort of,
Someone about to speak? I thought I heard somebody.
I started to say something and then said it wasn't really warranted.
Any other thoughts about that, or any thoughts about what Mr. Bowers put forward?
I mean, I guess my question, Mr. Bauer, would be, were there particular residents or whatever that stood out to you as significant? I mean, we have a long history of renters and tradespeople and folks who worked at various local schools. There's that one doctor who founded the Aquarian movement that I had never heard of until I looked at the staff report and only got a very brief mention in it. Nobody jumped out at me other than that guy who seems like he might have been as much of a character as the house itself.
He's probably responsible for all of these bizarre changes and additions that were made to it, given the timing. So I think there was not any one person who was sort of overwhelmingly significant, but he is of some significance. And the other people who live there tell us sort of about the use of the house and what was going on. And again, there's not any one person that you look at and you say, well, you know, George Washington slept in this house. But taken as a whole, it gives us some flavor for how the house was being used and who was living here and what was going on in the city.
I am all in favor of, you know, preserving in particular worker housing and good examples of that. This to me just does not seem like a good example of anything. And, you know, while components that may have been added, sort of odd additions, may have, you know, sort of met the threshold for being considered for significance, they may be over 75 years, but that does not mean they are significant. And I don't see any of the additions, the turret or, you know, odd sort of shed-like structures or any of the rest of it to be notably significant additions or anything that requires, you know, historic consideration. So I stand with my thoughts on the property not being historically significant.
I would agree and support Vice Chair Kelly's remarks. And I think if the criteria was looking at whether this is interesting and the occupants are interesting, I'd say this goes right to the top of the list because there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Whether it's significant, I have questions about that. I think it's more of a curiosity, more interesting than it would be significant in my judgment.
I wish it
That's
were
kind of
more
how.
interesting, because if it were more eclectic, that would be something, but it's not even that. You know, it's like the turret almost begins to go off in a wacky direction, but the rest of it is so mundane and like, meh, it's just, you know, it's bland and sad. It's, you know, so anyway, I wish, Mr. Falvey, I wish it were more interesting and more eclectic, because then we'd have something to really be talking about, but I don't see that here.
To me,
I think that's
it's
kind of
almost like a
my-
monument. Oh, go ahead.
No, I see that. I take a slightly narrower view of significance in this particular case because it's just not representing anything particularly well. It is older, and there have been cases in the past where I have voted for things significant just because they are kind of the anomaly on the streetscape and they're different, but that's usually because they're an interesting different, where they represent something kind of unique, at least along the street. And so that's my view on this.
I posit that maybe it represents a monument to bad architectural decision-making. That's about it to me.
Well, I think we've tossed this around. Does anyone want to say more, or should we go for a motion on this?
I move that we vote to find the property historically significant. A yes vote would mean that it is historically significant. A no vote would mean that it is not historically significant.
Second the motion.
In favor of Vice Chair Kelly's motion, say aye. Aye. And opposed?
Nay.
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 And we'll do a roll call. Mr. Falvey,
No.
Mr. Bauer,
I think I'm going to stick with yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
No.
Vice Chair Kelly,
No.
and I'll say no as well. And we need to adopt findings, which I think could incorporate the fact that, well, the fact, our view that it doesn't retain enough integrity. It doesn't reflect a good enough example of its style. It's not contributing to that portion of the streetscape of that block there. I don't know, that's the nutshell. Those are anything else you want to add?
Not importantly associated with any particular persons or events of significant historic significance. I believe it's the other half of the criteria, correct?
Yes, right. Okay. Anything else?
I move that we vote to adopt those findings.
Second that.
And by Mr. Chagnon, all in favor of adopting the findings proposed by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye.
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 Opposed? And a roll call, Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Abstain?
and Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Okay, there you have it. Applicant, you're free to demolish, apparently.
Thank you, Chairman Parks and the rest of the board. Have a great evening.
And I'm going to run off and form the
You
new
too.
Somerville branch of the Aquarians. I got to do more research first. Meeting next Thursday. So that concludes our cases for tonight, and we have some other business. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. And we'll just take them in order. We'll start off with the Adams Magoon House. And could staff just give us a little reminder? I know in an email you said it, but exactly what you need of us is needed of us tonight for this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you. And just before I start, one other note. I recommend that we move the CPC update to this portion as well, just so it all fits under the umbrella of the CPC related items. But to start with the Adams Magoon House, the CPC is requesting the commission state exactly why the building is so significant. And what they're looking for is additional reasons rather than normally historic significant criteria that we give. Things like that it's one of 4 or 5 18th century buildings left in the city, that the Adams that it references is a cousin of John Adams. So those sort of reasons.
Okay, and is this
Some
something?
background on this.
Sure.
So later on in the meeting, I will give the rest of the CPC report about funding decisions. This is the one applicant we have not The CPC has not yet made a funding decision. It's a very unusual case, and the CPC is looking for guidance, as staff explained, and I'll explain a little bit more. The applicant came to the CPC looking for about roughly $500,000 to substantially renovate the exterior of the house, which is now in fairly rough shape. The applicant does not have enough money of her own to do it. The CPC has discussed it several times at meetings. One consideration is whether we had enough money. When you look at the other applications, that's always a consideration for each application. And our ultimate conclusion, as I'll explain later, is that there was enough money if we wanted to do it. Second question is the significance of the building. Sarah White from our staff came to the CPC meeting to present in favor of having the CPC fund this work because of the significance of the building. And the ultimate conclusion of the CPC was, on the one hand, it was a really important building, and we ought to fund it if we could, but that we have never put that kind of money into a private house before. We've put money into public structures, by which I'm including both publicly owned structures and structures that are owned by nonprofits that function as public buildings. We have put small money on the order of a couple $1,000s into some private houses, and we have funded a project for the HPC, to have the HPC give out those kinds of small grants based on considerations. So, for example, the CPC funded the restoration of a stained glass window in a building that had fire damage, but the building was an important building. It was not in an historic district, and it was not protected. And the applicant agreed in exchange for our funding the renovation of the stained glass window to accept a preservation restriction on the entire building, both inside and out. So, so the city was getting the window renovated, was really getting something by putting some money into a privately owned house. Here, this building is already in a historic district, so we don't get as much out of a renovation. I'm sorry, out of a preservation restriction, and the amount of money that they are looking for is on the order of times what we put into this other stained glass window. So our conclusion was that we ought to fund it, but with some major caveats. One of them is that we wanted provision that when and if the property gets sold, excuse me, the city would get its money back, so that the owner could get the work done now, but would not get a windfall at some point in the future when the property gets sold. Otherwise, the city puts money into the building, it makes it more valuable when it gets sold, and the private owner would get that, and the CPC thought that was inappropriate. So we've talked about doing it subject to a restriction, which gets called a clawback restriction, that when the property gets transferred, the city would get the money back. It's not clear how long we could have for such a provision. I think the CPC would like to have it in perpetuity. Not clear that the legal department will okay something that is that long. And so we've asked the city solicitor's office to weigh in on what they think about that. The other consideration that people raised is if we put big money into a private house, are we going to be having many people with private houses line up for money from the CPC, even if it's subject to a clawback? And so the CPC wanted to hear from the HPC about how important and how unique this building is, so that it can take that into account in thinking about whether it should do it or whether it would be setting a bad precedent. So they really wanted to hear from us, not just is it significant, but how significant, how unusual or even unique the building is.
Mr. Chairman, if I may through you, I just wanted to let you know that Sarah White is in attendance if you need any guidance on this matter.
Okay, thank you. Well, a
Mr. Chairman,
general question.
if White is available, I would ask if she wants to add anything, because she's the person I think has been more involved in this since the beginning than anybody.
Sure. Is there, have anything? Are you there, Sarah?
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Add
Mr.
anything?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you and Mr. Bauer, thank you. I think Mr. Bauer gave a really good summary of, the basics of what's going on with this particular project. It started off with a window restoration project, and as one looks at things such as historic windows and maybe water infiltration from historic windows, some other things naturally come up. And as Mr. Bauer said, this is a very unusual request. Given the amount of money for a private structure. What is the CPC really wants to know what is so unique about this property. I think that they're in agreement that it is, but they wanted to hear a statement from you all. What I would offer to you is that this is one of the last 18th century structures remaining in the city. And for members of the audience, a building from the 1700s. It was built around 1783. There are 4, maybe 5 left in the city. One of them is the Tufts House on 78 Sycamore. That has been altered. It's very important, but it has been altered. This house is very intact on the interior and the exterior. Handcrafted moldings, hand-hewn beams, handmade mantles, the floorboards, etc. This building retains, it's in its original location, and it's facing in the original direction. Notice it's not facing Broadway, right? It's facing to the side. This had been part of it was like the numbers range 76 to 91 acre estate that had belonged to the family. And so this would have, in the 1700s, looked out onto all of its land, and everything around here was farmland at the time. It has the same number of bays that are very typical of the federal period, 5 bays on the front. It's 2 deep, 2 bays deep on the side. This was a period of time when a lot of houses of I wouldn't say I guess the middle class, maybe a bit of the landed gentry, was having 2 bays deep in houses rather than 1. And it's got the 2 windows under the peaks, the gable peaks at the side. It has 2 chimneys. It has, I believe it has a half moon over the door. It has fluted pilasters, etc. Adams, Joseph Adams, the occupant of the house, one of the occupants after whom it's named, was from the Adams family of John Adams and John Quincy Adams. And he married, let's see if I can remember here. Who did he marry? Sarah Tufts is whom he married. So we have a association with the Tufts family, which is so prominent and important to Somerville, and then Adams to the founding of the country. And their daughter, Sarah Ann, married John Magoon, for whom Magoon Square is named. So there's a lot of important association locally, and certainly a lot of important association nationally with this house, just in terms of the people who used to live there or owned it. It is a magnificent example of 18th century American architecture of the Federalist style existing in Somerville. Everything else that we have of this period has been, unfortunately, irrevocably changed in many, many ways. And this one has pride of original integrity, both externally as well as internally. Any other additional questions, just let me know. But this is a rare, one more rare building in Somerville.
Could you identify the other 18th century buildings?
Let me think. There's one, I forget the address exactly. There's one on Washington Street, and I forget the address. I don't know if it's 124 Washington. It's basically what we would consider like a Cape style house. And it has been, it has its Cape form, but a lot of the exterior has been changed. The windows have been removed. Since it was inventoried, it is a single building LHD. The like original, wood shakes have been removed from the house, and the interior has been completely changed. There's the Tufts, it's known as the Tufts House at 78 Sycamore. It has the form of an 18th century gambrel, but it has been changed, certainly on the interior. And the reason why I talk about the interior on this one is CPC has the ability to put a preservation restriction on the interior buildings as part of their funding scheme. You all don't have to worry about that from your assessment standpoint. But for example, the Somerville Museum has an interior preservation restriction. And 83 Belmont is in the process of doing that as well as part of all of their CPA funding. And an interior preservation restriction due to the important nature of the interior of this building is also something that will be sought for this building as well. So that is why, from the photos that I've seen, that is why I speak to the integrity of the interior as well. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the other one. There's one more building that comes to mind, and it's not very noticeable from the public way, and I cannot think of the address off the top of my head. Which is largely unhelpful, I know, for this conversation. But suffice it to say, here are three, and there's like possibly one more that is from the 18th century. And I want to say it's also off Broadway on one of the side streets, but it's not necessarily recognizable as an 18th century structure anymore. It is also not designated either, whereas the other three that I've mentioned to you are designated properties.
I guess technically the Powder House it's not the same kind of structure, but that's
right. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of that is that is I think late 1600s, early 1700s. But as far as like a privately owned residence, there are maybe 3 or 4.
I can't think of any others. The one you mentioned, my buddy's diner, I forgot about. That's been really heavily messed up on the outside.
Yeah, that's and in the past like roughly 10 years or so, unfortunately.
Sarah, I think you quickly found something on the web. It said that, are you thinking of 72 Rear Dane Street?
Thank you. Yes, I think that's the one.
Because it was built around 1790.
Yes.
Right, although isn't that the one that we ended up decertifying because of real questions about its authenticity and age?
I think if there were one, that might be the one.
That's ringing a bell, Mr. Bauer. I think I remember that because there was question, the methodology that went into that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about at most 4 of which this is the only one that's actually intact, original.
Right.
And several of the others are have had quite a lot of messing around. One of them may not even be authentic, and then this building, in addition to its physical characteristics, has all of the connections with the Adams family and the Magoon family.
Right. And please know that when I mention these other buildings from the 18th century that have been significantly altered, at least on the interior, and certainly some of them on the exterior, I would not ever recommend that they be de-designated or removed or anything of that nature, because of course they still have the integrity of the framing and the form and the massing and stylistically, whether they're a Cape style or gambrel, etc. I mean, those are all still very, very important elements that they retain. So that's not to, I don't want it to seem as though, we're in any way disparaging the fact that these are still remaining 18th century buildings. If I recall, there was one building that was moved several years ago. Mr. Bauer, you'll remember, and I think, actually, I think everybody but Robin might remember because you weren't on the commission at the time, but it was moved forward on the property. Was it like 583 Somerville Ave or 383? Oh, somehow I don't think that was 18th century. That was before my time as well, and I think that was earlier 19th century.
And on a list that I was just looking at, 6 Kent Court is listed.
Thank you. Yes.
It's a side gambrel.
Thank you. Yes, that's number 5. That's number 5. That is a gambrel. And that is from the 1700s, from about 1750. And I think it might have been moved to that location, which does not make it any less important. But yes, that is the other property that I was thinking of. And that's it. Everything else has been torn down or burned, or, you know, when Somerville became Somerville, you know, other areas, you know, that, you know, some buildings, you know, are part of Medford, you know, what have you. I mean, Medford was always Medford, but think about this too. This building is on, so as you follow this straight down through Broadway, through Magoon Square, and you cut onto, and you cut into Medford, right? You go through Magoon and down into Medford. And what is that? Medford Street at that point, Broadway to Medford Street. Just down the street there is the Isaac Royal House, right? The Royal House and Slave Quarters in Medford, and directly across the street from that, there's another 18th century house. So this is a relationship, if not directly with the Royal House. I'm sure that there had to have been interactions between the occupants thereof, but you know, we have a couple of properties left on that road to and from Boston, still in their original locations. And I think that if you can imagine the street without anything else there, or a few other buildings there, the fact that these two have remained is quite something. So yeah, so the Adams Magoon House is very, 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 very precious for many, many reasons. And I think that the current owner has done the best that they have been able to do, you know, under the circumstances, and now to ensure that this property remains for another, you know, 200-300 years, which it's certainly capable of doing. These houses did not have an expiration date, just like mine from 1735 also does not have an expiration date. I think that we could see this house last a lot longer, you know, if it's given the restoration work that it needs. And it will be a benefit to the city and to the public. So I think that the statement, a statement that the CPC is looking for, and Mr. Bauer, please jump in, is they would like to understand from you all just a lot of the things that I've said, which is the rarity of the building. You know, it's one of, you know, 4 or 5 remaining from this period. All of the original materials that it presents, the original style. It's a great example of a classic federal period structure. Its orientation to the street, its associations, both locally and nationally, et cetera. And, you know, we as staff can certainly, you know, help prepare that statement for you to forward if you want to give us the bullet points of what you'd like to say.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is this something that we're supposed to vote on tonight, or is it just general discussion guidance?
It's something that you will need to vote on tonight for, and I would say, you know, you list out the things that you would like me to touch upon, that you would like staff to touch upon in its letter, but you would need to, and by doing so, you would be indicating that you find that, you know, these things are very, very important about this structure, and therefore that's why you feel that it is important to fund. Although you can't really talk about the funding, you can only really talk about how important the house is. Mr. Bauer, what would you add to that? What would you agree?
I think you're muted.
Sorry, I actually lost my internet connection for a moment. So I didn't hear all of that. That seemed like a pretty good list of things to me. So I'm just going to repeat my list, which probably is pretty similar to yours. It's that there are literally no more than a handful of buildings from the 18th century. Of those buildings, this is the only one that's in substantially original condition. It's also of those houses are in by far the most prominent position, and has other than the Oliver Tufts house, it has much more significant other historical connections because of the Adams family and the Magoon family.
I couldn't top what has been said already. I think the trick is we're not going to draft a letter tonight. We're just going to present some bullet points, and we've just heard like 4 or 5 of them that are all good. I think to me, it's the best representation of that time period, that federal in Somerville. It's the best preserved. It has a unique situation on the street, has a prominent location, its original siting, as opposed to being relocated as the Tufts house was. And as was mentioned, the interior is very intact as well, worth mentioning.
Thank you. I had forgotten to mention that.
I'd be comfortable with something that touches on all those bases.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I can certainly come up with that text, and I think that the commission should vote to allow staff to come up with that text. And might I also suggest that that then once that is done, I could run it by you for you to see if it meets what the commission discussed and felt, and then that way I could pass it along on your behalf to the CPC. Would that be acceptable to everyone?
That works for me.
Okay.
So if that's the case, then we could receive a motion that we request that staff prepare a communication from us to the CPC that includes the points discussed already, that's summarized earlier by staff and by Mr. Bauer, by me. Anything else?
And that it would be, and then staff would run it by you to ensure that it was what was discussed, so that then staff can pass it along on your behalf to the CPC.
So moved.
All right. Moved by Mr. Chagnon, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do for the record the roll call of Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Should we
I will write
slide
that up
right
and get
over?
that to you in a couple of days.
Okay. Should we move to the Elizabeth Peabody House, since that's somewhere in the same vein there?
I have to
Yes.
apologize. I have to step away for a minute, but I'll be back.
Mr. Chairman, so the Elizabeth Peabody is coming to you. They need a letter of support for their application for an MPPF grant. You'll need to vote on authorizing staff to provide a letter of support on behalf of the HPC for the Elizabeth Peabody House. Their narrative was sent to you in an earlier email of their scope of work.
Read that narrative, so I don't really feel any great need to go over it in great detail, but if anybody would like to discuss the substance of that more. And otherwise, I'm fine moving staff forward with that endeavor.
I am as well. Let me just add, there's been, I think, a really nice partnership between the Elizabeth Peabody House and the city through the HPC and the CPC, where the Elizabeth Peabody House uses the building to provide important services that people in the city need, and has also been committed to slowly and gradually restoring the building to preserve, or in some cases bring back its historic character. And that's just a nice combination.
Another nice thing about that whole project is its location is in an area that is not super well represented by older preserved structures over there. So it's kind of nice having that being brought up like it is.
And it's so visible.
So if that's the case, then we could have a motion for this.
So I move that we ask staff to provide a letter on behalf of the commission in support of the Elizabeth Peabody House's request for funding. That phrase.
I second that. And let me add also, before we finish, one of the things that the CPC always is asking applicants to do is, can you find some other source of money so that the CPA is not the sole source of funding? And that's precisely what they are doing here.
Okay, so we have a motion from Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll call Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. And Mr. Chagnon is still missing, so should we just make this 4-0, assuming he's essentially abstaining? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, those are the two. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, through you, as part of the general CPC update section, we will also need to vote for a new liaison to the CPC, as Mr. Bauer will be terming out, and we need a formal replacement at the CPC. If you all remember, Mr. Bauer was graciously finishing out Alan Bingham's term there. So you'll need a vote on that.
Right. Okay. I take it then that Mr. Bauer is bowing out of this role. Is that what I understand?
Yes. I mean, I was happy to do it on an interim basis, but the commission really needs a permanent replacement. My original expectation would be that I would be on through the end of the year to wrap up the funding in this year's funding cycle. As you can see, and as we'll discuss more, the CPC has still not finished the funding. Things ran over, and so we made some decisions earlier this year and some more then at the beginning of this month, with still the Adams McGowan House left to go. So I would be willing to stay on basically through this funding cycle, but then it really is time for somebody to replace me. Probably better if somebody's ready to step up now. I think better to have that happen now as the CPC moves into its next yearly cycle.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this is Sarah again. Mr. Bauer, are you saying that you would like to stay on until they complete their funding cycle, given where you are in it at this point? If so, then, forgive us for being presumptuous. It's just been on our list of things to do.
No, that's okay. Because I think, in fact, I'm in a holdover position now. I think my term officially probably ended at the end of December. So I had flagged this as an issue.
Yeah.
We need a replacement now, independent of whether I stayed on the CPC or left.
Mm-hmm.
So if the commission would like to have me stay on through the rest of this funding cycle in a holdover position, and then elect somebody to take over once the funding cycle is over, that would be fine. If people would like to just pick somebody now, that's also fine, whatever is the pleasure of the commission.
If I could recommend, Mr. Chairman, through you, I think it's really important that you select somebody now, because otherwise we'll revisit this again in another couple of months. And what could be good then is whoever is that replacement could at least be attending the meetings with Mr. Bauer, listening to all the discussions and whatnot, which I think would be really important. And I think, Mr. Parks, not to put you on the spot, I think you were the backup for Mr. Bauer, so I didn't know if that's something that you wanted to step into permanently. That was not putting you on the spot, even though it really did sound like it.
Yeah, well, there are 1, 2, 3 of us. in total, our vast commission here.
Right, exactly.
I think it makes a world of sense to keep Mr. Bauer on until we're finished. We've wrapped up everything to do with what's been going on the past year-ish. And then that I or whoever take over once we begin the next round of it. I did attend virtually 2, I think, meetings, 1 or 2. I missed the last 1 or 2, just to get up to speed. But is there anybody here who would like to take that role on?
No, I cannot.
Okay, well,
I'm not interested either. I can't. I don't have the ability to do that.
I think it's going to be me, and that's fine. I just, as I mentioned, if I could, I'm happy to chug along. How many more months, Mr. Bauer? When will this be wrapped up, do you think?
My expectation is that probably within the next month, this will be wrapped up. The Adams Lagoon is the only thing left, and the CPC is waiting to hear back, A, from us about how unique this building is, and B, from the city solicitor about what kind of a clawback provision can be put in. So I expect by the next meeting, we will have that information. The next meeting may not be the March meeting because the March meeting is the annual public hearing. So it may not be until the April meeting that we will actually wrap stuff up.
Okay. And so after April would become a new, I'm not sure how this all works with that commission. Is it then like a blank slate and you begin the whole process of soliciting projects and
that's right.
Discussing?
I mean, that actually begins with the public hearing, which will be later this month. So this is the beginning. The idea was to have finished the last year's funding cycle before we had to start this year. Is that this year it looks like we're going to overlap.
Okay.
But I expect that by April at the latest that we will be done, because as I said, there's only one more thing to decide. It's Adams Lagoon, and if we don't decide it in March, I expect we'll decide it in April.
Okay. Well, that's fine. If you want to designate me, I'll agree to that role.
That's great, Eric. You will do a really good job on this, and I think you'll have fun doing it too. So I would like to nominate Eric Parks to be the HPC designee on the CPC.
I will second that. With thanks to Chair Parks.
Okay, we have this motion to put me on the commission there, CPC.
Maybe Vice Chair Kelly ought to handle the vote.
Yeah,
So,
right. I was wondering how that works.
Okay. So all those in favor of appointing Chair Parks as the CPC representative from the commission, say aye.
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 I abstain despite out of necessity. I suppose I have to.
You don't have to.
I mean, I'm accepting it, so I guess I'll vote yes. Otherwise, we have another problem here. So, yeah.
And then we'll take a roll call. Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
Chair Parks.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes.
Right.
So, all in
And what is
favor?
that next? Oh, so we have a vote. When is this next meeting?
So the next meeting is March. We just get the date. I think they are on the, they're normally on the third Wednesday of the month. So it will be on Wednesday, the 22nd of March. And
That'll
then
be the 4th.
I'm sorry, I said the third, but you're right. I meant the 4th.
Okay, so the 22nd will be the 4th.
22nd, yes, it's the 4th. And then in April,
Is that one of those usually happen at 6 something?
they happen at 6:30, and I'm sorry that I'm not giving you all the information about the dates.
Well, the Wednesday's added to my calendar, the one for March, and the April is the public hearing.
So the public hearing is March 22nd.
Okay. So the April meeting is just welcome to the new year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be is that the 4th? So it'll be the 26th of April?
So that's what I'm looking for. I want to get the schedule for you. And I thought I had all of the dates in one place, and I'm just having trouble.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this is Sarah again. If you'd like, I can let Roberta Cameron, our CPA manager, know, and then I can connect the two of you with her, and then she can provide you with the schedule and whatnot, if that's
Sure.
convenient. Okay, very good.
Let me be clear, is the commission asking me to stay on through the funding cycle and then Eric will take over, or is Eric
Yes.
back immediately?
No, if you could stick around till we're through the funding cycle. The only thing though is that there's a chance I'm going to be gone that week of April 15th.
Okay.
Although this is still a remote thing.
It's still remote.
Okay, so I could possibly just log in from wherever I am. As long as there's reception in rural Tanzania, okay. No, just kidding. So if you could just send me if Roberta could send me the schedule, I'll plug that into my calendar. So the next meeting in this month, both Dick and I will be in attendance. So I can get up to speed, so you can formally vote on things. Actually, how will that work then? If I'm now the designee, will I be the one voting and stuff?
Well, that was my question, is when you're effective.
Oh, well, can we stipulate that in this, that I don't take over till after this next meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
So we can say that you're effective as of April, or as of May, if we think that Adams Magoon may not come up until the April meeting. Either way is fine with me.
Okay. Well, how would we condition that in this vote? Just until?
I think it would just get an effective date for you. We would just say when your designation was effective.
Well, would you be okay with attending the April meeting? I mean, with being that role, and if Adams Magoon is already settled by then, you could just, I don't know how much voting there is at these meetings mid-year like that, or if it's just more or less talking.
Yeah, I mean, there's some procedural things that have to get done, but most of the voting is on the money, so there are not a lot of votes once we get through the rest of the funding. But it sounds like we're going to say that your designation is effective as of the beginning of May.
Yeah, if you're okay with that, that'd work. And I'll attend both meetings between now and then.
Good. Thank you again, Eric, for being willing to take it on.
Sure. Well, thank you for doing it all these years. It's been helpful. Anything else in the CPC update, or we already covered our bases for that? I see it's on the agenda.
No, I wanted to give a report on the decisions. So let me get I had Roberta send me a spreadsheet. So let me get the spreadsheet up. My computer seems to be slow tonight. Once I get it up, I will ask for screen sharing.
I will give you that ability while you look for the spreadsheet.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Bauer, you have permission to be, to share your screen.
Okay, so everybody seeing the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the spreadsheet of all of the applications that got funded. The blue ones are historic preservation, the green ones are open space. The housing money basically comes off the top at the beginning. It's given to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the CPC doesn't make the individual awards.
Mr. Bauer, Mr. Chairman, through you, I recommend anyone who's not speaking mute their microphones. That might help with the feedback. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, thanks. So the CPC doesn't make the decisions, individual decisions about the housing. Once a year, the CPC does a plan about how it's going to allocate the money, and then it simply turns the housing money over to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it makes the decisions about open space and historic preservation. And on this spreadsheet, you can see the different applications. Column D was the full request. Column E were some alternatives we consider. And column F is the actual funding decision we made. And you can see that just bear with me a moment. I think I have not put up the most current version that got sent to me. So just bear with me a moment, please. That's better. Is everybody seeing this spreadsheet marked scenarios 3-2-23?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the, so column F are the allocations that were actually made. And you can see all of the decisions for that column have been made except for Adams Magoon. Adams Magoon is marked red, everything else is black, showing that they were made. We funded, you'll see down at the bottom, all of the open space requests that were made got fully funded, and we ended up funding the bulk of the historic preservation requests up at the top after we decided there was enough money. If you look down here, if you look at lines 17 through 19, where it says estimated available FY23, there was a total of $1.6 million available. But in addition to that, if you look farther down on line 23, 24, and 25, you can see we had an additional $1.6 million available that had been carried over from previous years. So there was a total of $3.2 million, 3,190, which you can see in line 27 that we had available. And so we felt comfortable funding projects at over $2 million, because that still leaves about $1 million in reserve for that can be carried into future years or used when there are out of cycle or emergency requests come up during this year. We did not want to spend everything we had, but we decided we felt comfortable leaving a reserve of $750,000 to $1 million. So we ended up making most of the decisions without feeling like we had to make too many trade-offs between projects. We fully funded the Elizabeth Peabody House at $300,000. We fully funded the next round at Grace Baptist. They have a multi-year project. This is also called the Cross Street Church, which is not a church anymore. It's a community center owned by the Somerville Hispanic Association for Community Development. And they have a multi-year project, and we have given them other funding in the past, and agreed to fully fund the next round, which was $425,000. We funded the Somerville Museum, not fully because they had also applied for ARPA funds. And we decided if ARPA funds were available, we would rather have them get money from ARPA funds. And so we took off the part of their request that could be funded by ARPA, and we fully funded the rest of it. 90 Union Square, the old fire station that has been the SCAT building, they were looking for money. The city was looking for money to do renovations on the tower, and the rest of the building is being done by private organization. And we ended up deciding not to put any money into it this year, although we're willing to look at it again. And Mudflap Studios was looking for $15,000 to do some planning about renovating the front, and we fully funded that. So the only thing that's left then is the Adams Magoon House. The full request was $463. It's now at $150, and it's going to depend in part on what the CPC decides in light of what the city solicitor has to say, as well as the opinion that we are going to give based on our meeting tonight. I think the CPC would be open to doing more than that if the owner wants to do it. I think she's not sure whether she wants to fund it all and then have the possibility that that larger amount of money would come out later if the property were transferred. So that will be a decision for her to make. I've run it through it pretty quickly because we had talked about a number of these before, but I wanted to let people see where we came out and what the thinking was. Do people have thoughts or questions? I think everybody muted yourself,
Yeah, I
so if
did.
you want to speak, you have to unmute.
Yeah, I just realized. I've seen this. I've already had a moment to digest this from previous meetings, so it's all fairly rational. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks for the update, Dick. This is good.
Sure. Thanks, everybody, for taking time to listen. And we just added, as I said before, it was nice that we ultimately decided that we could fund all of the projects, including the historic preservation, as much as we decided we wanted to without feeling like we were short of money and had to trade off one project for another. It was a nice place to be in, and we were glad to be able to do all of these. Wendy, what do I need to do to stop? Can I just hit the stop showing screen and that will
Yes.
revert?
Perfect.
That leaves us with the minutes and the draft rules of policy and procedure, both of which need to be voted on tonight. Let's just do quick the meeting minutes since they're next on the list. I've read them and don't have any comments. Anybody have anything they want to bring up on those?
I had one, so let me bring it up. Sorry, every time I say I want to look at something, my computer says slow down. Probably would be happier if I restarted it. So I had one comment down near the end in the CPC section. I think it's page 8. Under CPC update, it says Mr. Bauer stated that the biggest task for the CPC is to acquire funding. I think that should say is to provide funding.
Oh, right.
CPC has no task of acquiring it. It needs to acquire, but we have basically nothing to do with it actually happening. Other people just pour money into our pockets. And our biggest task then is to spend it. So I think the appropriate word there should be provide rather than acquire.
Thank you. I have taken note of that.
Okay. Any other revisions? Not, then we could go with a motion on this.
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second that.
By Mr. Bauer, seconded by Vice Chair Kelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr.
Yes.
Falvey,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And the last item is the draft rules of policy and procedure. And last time some of us of this reviewed them last meeting, and I don't think you were here, Mr. Bauer. We decided it would be best if you could, the input you might have.
Yeah, my opinion is that I don't think we should adopt them tonight because I think they need a lot of work. In a couple of regards. One of them is they eliminate a number of things that have been in our previous one. And I don't know whether people did that deliberately, but I would want to hear what people's thinking was on it. For example, the old rules provided a minimum vote for designation of historic districts. I would be open to not having us do that, but it looked to me like somebody drafted the new ones without looking at the old ones and seeing what needed to get captured. The other problem is I think there are just a number of defects in the new rules themselves, tracking some things like the state law or the ordinance, but not tracking them very adequately. So I'll give a couple of examples. In on page 3, standards of conduct, meeting participation. Subsection B, and then small row numeral 3, which is about when alternates can vote, which is really not about standards of conduct at all. But in addition to that, it says alternate members may participate in discussion on any item before the commission, but may not vote unless designated by the chair to act in the place of a full member who's absent, has a conflict of interest, or is otherwise able to vote on the item. That would mean, for example, that DJ could not be voting tonight because he is not designated by the chair to act in the place of a full member who's absent, has a conflict of interest, or is otherwise unable to vote. He's voting because we don't have enough members. But that's not what this provision in the policy and procedure says. It only allows alternates to vote when designated to act in the place of a full member. So I think there are a number of things like that that I think need more thought and care, both to decide whether we mean to be undoing some of the things we've done in the previous version deliberately, but also to make sure that these actually do what we want them to do. Another example here under standards of conduct, I'm looking at 3A, small Roman numeral 2, notwithstanding emergency situations, any member unable to attend will notify staff at least 4 weeks prior to the meeting. As I read that, it says even in the emergency situations, you have to give 4 weeks notice, notwithstanding that they are emergencies. I don't think that's what we would want to mean. So I think that they need a lot of cleaning up, and they need to be reconciled with the old ones, not because we should necessarily carry over everything from the old ones, but that we ought to be deliberate in making decisions about what we want to change from the old ones. But sorry to be throwing a monkey wrench in here.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this is Sarah. So I wanted to stay on for this discussion too. So what I would need from you, Mr. Bauer, is a list of all of the items that you think need to be revisited and why, because what I don't want to do is I don't want us to go back in blindly and try and, other than the things that you've mentioned, figure out what those other items might be. There are some things that we have in there to make them consistent with what all of the other boards and commissions have adopted, because I know that that is something that you all have been interested in doing as well. Such as alternate member vote, for example. Like tonight you have enough without Mr. Chagnon to vote because you have a quorum, so he does not need to vote, but participation in the discussion is really important. So if you could enumerate those and get them to me.
But we would want him to vote. Our practice has always been, we want as many people as we can up to the maximum of 7. So we've never had a time that we've said alternates are not going to vote because they're not necessary for quorum. The only time they don't get to vote is if we have more than 7 people.
Let me think about that, because I think that let me think about that, because I I want to look at what the other boards have done in that matter as well. But when could you get me your list?
I will try and do it within the next week.
Okay, that would be really helpful. Because then I can take a look at it, and we can start attacking that to get it back in front of you.
Sure.
Okay, super.
Sorry not to have looked at this earlier so I could have given feedback before tonight's meeting.
Okay, no, that's okay. That'd be really helpful. We want to get this done as quickly as we can, obviously, but within reason, of course, to make sure that we've answered all of your questions. Because the other boards and commissions, I think that they finished their vote by January. So we're a bit behind, and I want to make sure that all the boards and commissions are on the same page. So as quick as a bunny, I will look for them.
I can't promise I'm going to be as quick as a bunny.
Oh, I'm too old to be quick as a bunny anymore myself. So, but yeah, the sooner the better, and then we can address them, because I know it'll take us a bit of time to go through them again. So,
Okay.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you for noticing these things.
Yes.
I think that's our agenda. Do we have any word on our potential new members, what the time frame might be on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you. So we are in the process of interviewing them, and by we, I mean the Appointments Advisory Committee. We've interviewed 2 so far, and the last one will be interviewed by the end of this month, and then they still have to go through the full process, as you will all remember. So sometime by summer, we are hoping that we will have new members.
Okay. If they're lurking out there, potential new members, hope to meet you one of these days when you're on our commission. All right, well, that's about it for the items. Anything else anybody want to bring up before we adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
See you in
Chair.
a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
All right.